Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our readers and listeners of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a good position to enjoy the show along with your favorite beverage. Before we get into our discussion, we want to say thanks for the questions coming from our audience at SmithWeekly, including Cindy W., Luke A., Jackie A., and Mike P. Today we're talking with Darin Labrenz, President, CEO, and Director of Pure Gold Mining, a Canadian-focused company advancing the Manset Gold Project in Red Lake District, Ontario. The company is listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol PGM and also on the U.S. OTC markets under the symbol LRTNF. Darin, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting us.
So, Darin, give the audience your background, going back to before you joined Oxygen Capital and becoming the boss at Pure Gold.
Yeah, so I'm a geologist by background. I worked for probably the better half of, or first half of my career with a company called Placer Dome that was acquired by Barrick in 2006. Initially started in exploration geology and transitioned pretty quickly to the operational side, having worked in both underground and open pit environments, mostly in gold. Latter part of my time with Placer Dome was spent in evaluations where I was responsible for evaluating opportunities and really working on various feasibility studies. Part of that journey, and this is a part of the story, took me through the camp of Red Lake, Ontario. I worked initially as a beat geologist underground at Placer Dome's Campbell Mine, which is a part of the Red Lake deposit, and then ultimately transitioned into a role as chief geologist there. So I had developed a pretty good understanding of the opportunities that the camp had to offer.
Darin, for our listeners who aren't familiar with Oxygen Capital, tell us about the group and then kind of give us the Oxygen strategy and approach to the natural resource market.
Yeah, so Oxygen Capital is a company formed by several founders, including Mark O'Day, and it really came about after Frontier Gold, which was run by Mark, was acquired in 2011 by Newmont for $2.3 billion. And so Oxygen Capital is formed as a way to retain key talent and also a way to incubate new companies, if you will. And so there's been several companies that have been born out of that. True Gold was one such company, acquired a couple years back by Endeavour Mining for its Karma project in Burkina Faso. Today we have 4 companies in the room, so to speak. Pure Gold is one of them, Liberty Gold, Discovery Metals, and Sun Metals. The model is, generally the same amongst the companies that share that name. We look for deposits that have seen some work, often some historical mining. They have generally pretty broad data sets, but there are areas where we feel that exploration has been not fully uncovered, so to speak. And so we believe we can walk in and add a lot of value and move these projects forward. And so that model has worked quite successfully, and we continue to move forward on that basis.
So is there a set of principles and best practices at the Oxygen Group where they employ building these individual companies to a state of value? What internal values are placed on these businesses from the point of aligning with shareholders, management compensation practices, timing of events, protecting the capital structure, all while you advance value?
Yeah, so I mean we're clearly focused on advancing value and very much aligned with our shareholder interests. We look to effectively grow the assets initially through the exploration phase by building resources, carrying them through to an economic decision point. We've had success across the whole range again of development, if you will. When you look at Frontier Gold, they moved Long Canyon through all the way into an economic study and ultimately were acquired there. True Gold, on the other hand, went right through to construction and was on the threshold of pouring gold when acquired by Endeavour Mining. With respect to Pure Gold, we acquired this project, in a period that was a very difficult period for the markets, 2008 and 14 was when the project was acquired. We were able to do so for a net cost of acquisition of $8.5 million. And when you look at what we acquired a very large mineral system. When you look at Madsen itself, 2.6 million ounces of historical production. At the time, a resource of approximately 1.2 million ounces. And we've been able to add significant value over the last 4 years through a concerted exploration effort. We've grown the resource to where the point where today we've nearly doubled it. And we've brought through a feasibility study disclosing first-time disclosure of reserves just a couple of weeks ago.
Right, and I would say that price tag was well picked up, so congratulations on that. And obviously the company, if you look back to 2014 forward, you can see that there's been a nice performance really all the way, even though there's been, in the natural resource market, there's been some up and down since then, but yet Pure Gold seems to have a very steady share base and continues to move higher, so it's congratulations on that scoop up. So Darin, moving on to another subject, we've had some high-level consolidation action with regards to news coming out of Barrick and Newmont. What do you see happening in the gold mining space going forward over the next few years?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. There's as you highlight, there's been some consolidation activity in the gold mining space, and if I point more closely to home, we've certainly seen a fair bit of activity over the last several years in Canada with some of the acquisitions that have happened. I'll highlight the acquisition of Lakeshore by Tahoe. We had Eldorado step in and acquire Integra Gold. We had CB acquired Claude Resources by Silver Standard, and in many cases, this reflects a move to reduce risk profiles across these companies. Being in Canada, strong mining jurisdiction, really does elevate the status of the projects, if you will. My view is there's a real scarcity of quality projects out there. We have one of them, and so we feel that we're well placed with some of the activity that we're just starting to see a heat up in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree. I think some of the moves by some of the companies you mentioned is clearly changing jurisdictions and getting into a more diverse asset base and looking towards places like Canada to really become the base at which you would call your operations, and then maybe consider expanding outside later. But it's certainly a move back to some safer, more predictable, robust jurisdictions. So let's move to Pure Gold. Give us an overview of the company, and then I want to get into recent and upcoming events.
Sure. So Pure Gold was formed, again about 5 years ago, and it was formed on the acquisition of the Madsen Red Lake Gold Project in Red Lake, Ontario. When we acquired the project, it certainly had the attributes that I talked about. Historical producer, having produced 2.6 million ounces of gold over a continuous 36-year operating period. It had scale. The project, consolidated now by us, has 47 square kilometers of ground, and on top of that, there was a endowment at the time with respect to resources of about 900,000 ounces of indicated and another 300,000 ounces of inferred. So strong legacy position there with historical production, a large land package, infrastructure in place with a mill and tailings facility, significant permitting in hand. But importantly, from our perspective, the project had really lacked from a systematic and sustained exploration approach or focus. And so we brought that to the project. And the first couple of years had our heads down, really building out some ideas, and we were able to leverage that into true success with the growth of resource and first time disclosure of reserves on an economic basis in the last couple of weeks.
So give us a quick view of the recent feasibility study results, and share with us, if you can, the information on the PEA that just came out. Give us kind of an overview on that and tell us your thoughts on it.
Sure. And I'll do that in a moment. I want to step back for a moment and just talk about quality. There's a lot of different ways you can talk about a high quality ore body or high quality mine, and we use that term, top tier or world class a lot in our industry, but there's obviously no clear definition on what that means. Some people call a top tier deposit a deposit of 5 million ounces or more, or perhaps we'll look to an economic metric and we'll talk about net present value, and people will describe a quality project of having a net present value of 250 million or more. Another way we talk about it is, does your project have the potential or has it demonstrated a real strong positive impact on society and investors? Is this a deposit that has returned money to investors for a long period of time? These are all different ways that we talk about quality. And, I'll bring that now to Pure Gold and our Madsen Red Lake project. When we look at endowment, I talked about the historical production on the property, 2.6 million ounces. When I look at our current resource, which was released earlier this year, we have 2.06 million ounces of indicated resources at a grade of 8.7 grams per ton. We've got another nearly 500,000 ounces of inferred resources. So you're looking at an endowment here that's starting to approach that 5 million ounce mark. We did release a feasibility study earlier this month. That feasibility study outlined a long life, robust project, 12 years of production, a reserve of 1 million ounces, and in there we have an NPV of just shy of $250 million. So we meet it on that metric. When we talk about a long life asset and returning to investors, this operation historically produced for 36 years. Our current feasibility plan outlines another 12 years of production. So now you're starting to talk about potential for 48 years of production or more from the Madsen Red Lake deposit. And really, if that doesn't meet the definition of a long life asset returning value to society investors, I'm not sure what does. So we're pretty excited about obviously about our project, and we're excited about the feasibility study we put out. It does outline a long life mine. It generates a positive return, as demonstrated by our after-tax net present value of $247 million. A very low capital cost. So this is a low capital intensity project with just over 90 million Canadian, or about 70 million US of initial capital required to put this project into production. But importantly, we see this as the first phase of a development plan that allows us to look at opportunities to grow and to scale the asset to improve both the potential mine life and the production profile of the project.
So for some of the folks that are listening that have not reviewed Pure Gold, give us the status and what you guys are doing on. Give us the status of the permits first, and then also give us the information about the local community, the community outreach work that's going on.
Sure. So the Madsen Gold project is a permitted mine. It is a mine that those permits have been transferred into Pure Gold's name. So we hold the two key permits, if you will, which are your environmental compliance approval for air and noise, which regulates the ventilation and noise emitters on the project, as well as the environmental compliance approval for effectively the mill and tailings effluent. Now, those two permits were issued originally in the 1990s, and so we are looking to amend those permits to modernize them and to reflect the mine plan that we've just released in our feasibility study. Our work on that is well advanced. We've been, collecting baseline work over the last several years. We filed the first amendment for the air and noise compliance approval in August of last year, and we're set to file the environmental compliance approval for the mill and effluent here shortly with the conclusion of the feasibility study. Those will drive a regulatory process that effectively has a maximum 1-year service clock window, if you will. So maximum 1 year for those permits to be amended and returned to us. Very low risk of environmental assessment or return of those amendment permits, given that it is a brownfield site. We don't foresee significant additional legacy or significant additional impacts from the mining operation, and we're not looking at a change in the footprint, if you will, of the existing project. The project sits in the community of Red Lake, Ontario. It's a collection of communities with about 5,000 inhabitants. It really was born out of mining, with the first mines in the area initiated in the 1920s. In fact, our Madsen mine first started production in the mid-1930s. So we see very strong support from the community. It is, again, it is part of the DNA of Red Lake, and we're right in the heart of it.
Can you give us a little bit on construction timeline? Tell us how the financing is going to go. Whether we're looking at equity offtake, debt, mix of that, and then also let us know what the all-in sustaining costs are that you guys have planned.
Yeah, so we're looking at we're looking here at a project that has, again, one of the lowest capital requirements out there, with a total initial capital of about 95 million Canadian. And so we engaged Endeavour Financial about 6 months ago to help us on project finance, and we've been looking at various alternatives in terms of moving the project finance forward. There is fairly strong interest from a financing perspective, and so with the conclusion of the feasibility study, we'll be putting out what we call an information memorandum to interested parties so they can effectively evaluate the cash return of the project and determine what level of debt, if you will, the project can support. Ultimately, we'll look at all forms of finance. We are likely to pursue something that is a more vanilla combination of debt and equity, with the existing infrastructure on the ground that's already been sunk into the project, which again includes an existing mill and tailings facility and underground access. We think that there is potential for this project to bear more debt than you might otherwise, given that infrastructure.
Okay.
With respect to the cost profile, we're looking at total cash cost life of mine of $607 per ounce US, and all-in sustaining cash costs of about $787 per ounce life of mine. We do better in the first 8 years, where we're looking at a cash cost that's about $535 an ounce.
The total capex is not much, and so that's also in very a good position that you guys are in that regard. On that topic, are you of the opinion that with regards to interest rates on debt, do you think that you guys have the ability to get a good interest rate on the debt? What is your opinion on these larger companies, some of the majors that potentially have access to lower interest rates? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a fairly competitive marketplace out there right now for mine finance and for debt in particular. Obviously, your rates are going to be tied to the some of the covenants, if you will, or requirements from a debt perspective. And so there's going to be a range of debt rates out there. At the end of the day, we're going to look to finance this in the most capital efficient manner, with the lowest cost of debt. And as to whether we can achieve rates similar to a larger company, we'll certainly work to reduce those as much as we can. The competitive nature out there of the debt finance environment right now will assist us with keeping those rates as low as possible.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, and for potential suitors too, looking at this and seeing how you guys go about putting this together, and how that might affect them if they're seriously looking at the company. What about royalty streaming? Is there any thought that maybe there's a deal in the works, or would you guys look at deals from, say, a Royal Gold, a Franco, a Wheaton, or a Sandstorm by chance?
Yeah, I think we have a duty to look at all forms of project finance, be it debt, equity, streaming, royalty, private equity. I don't think that we have any particular restrictions at this point. We may have some views on what we would prefer, but at the end of the day, what our goal here is to minimize the cost of capital and do so without limiting the upside potential of the project, which we see as very, very strong on our Madison Red Lake Gold project.
So, Darin, when can we expect a construction decision?
The board, we just completed our feasibility study. We put out the results of a preliminary economic assessment today on some of the discoveries we've made on the last several years. The board needs to sit down and review these studies and the outcome, and we'll make a decision here in the near term. It is a very short build to production. Again, given some of the infrastructure we have in place, so we're looking at about a 13-month project execution schedule. And so if we put some assumptions in there and assume that we have a production decision in April, you're looking at May 2020 as a potential first gold pour on the project.
Yeah, that sounds great. Give us a little bit of a flavor for the shareholders at Pure Gold. I know there's a list of suitors that are on the roster. Do you see the company getting acquired soon, or do you think you guys will need to go ahead and commission and ramp up before someone pulls the trigger?
Yeah, so to start with our shareholder register, we've got a very supportive group of shareholders that have been helping us move the project forward. The largest shareholder on the register is AngloGold Ashanti. They have approximately 14.9% of the shares that are issued and outstanding. They've been a very supportive partner moving the project forward. We also have Rob McEwen on there at about 7%, and he was, he's no stranger to Red Lake, obviously, and has been very supportive of the company. We're focused on building a mining company. We think we've got a really unique position here where we've got, as I indicated earlier, we've got a project that really hits a lot of the criteria for, a top-tier project. And we've got a production plan here that has a very low cost of entry with a capital cost of 95 million Canadian or 70 million US. So this is something that's manageable for a junior developer. And so we're focused on that. We're focused on building a mining company and moving it forward. Having said that, I recognize that there's a real scarcity of quality projects out there. We are in Canada. We have significant permitting in place. The low capital nature of the project is attractive. The production profile is attractive, and we recognize that these things are very much in demand.
And you think at this point, with the current status, you guys will move forward with construction, and there's no problem with bringing it online to produce. And then at what point are you guys going to kind of convert some of the resources over into the better categories? And what's the plan as far as growing the resource? Are you guys gonna build this thing and then also at the same time expand the resource?
Yes, so we've more or less, to use the anecdote, we've had our foot on the pedal for pretty much the last 3 years. We've drilled more than 200,000 meters in that time frame. We've seen the resource grow to, as described, 2.1 million ounces indicated and nearly 500,000 ounces of inferred resources over that period. We've now put out 2 economic studies, one a feasibility study that's our base case, if you will. This is the first phase of our development plan that outlines 1 million ounces of reserve and a 12-year mine life. Today we layered on the outcome of a preliminary economic assessment on new zones that we've discovered over the last several years. These generate an after-tax NPV of $51 million and layer on another 4 years of production. We think there's an opportunity here, as call it our second phase of development, if you will. There's an opportunity to move those resources forward and do further work to potentially convert inferred to indicated, to do additional study work to layer those on top of the feasibility study mine plan and potentially impact the production profile at Madsen Red Lake. And so we see real value in continuing to explore, to grow those resources, to convert those resources so that we can further investigate that opportunity. Beyond that, we see immense exploration potential in the property. This is we've got a deep primordial structure that runs across our property for more than 7 kilometers that hosts 2 known past producers, an endowment that's approaching 5 million ounces, as previously described. And importantly, all of these, what were previously seen as disparate deposits and zones and mines, they're all collectively part of the Madsen Red Lake mineral system. And so we see expansive gaps in there where we continue to do work. And I think there's a real opportunity and potential to grow the resource within those gaps.
And Darin, with the management and the team that's there at Pure Gold, if there is an equity raise as part of the construction financing, will you see that Oxygen and the whole team there will be participating in that equity raise?
Yeah, we've when you look at the shareholdings of the management group, all of that has been bought either on the market or through financing. We've all been participants in the past, and I would expect to see the same thing moving forward. We've been obviously very much behind our own project.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen certainly that you've bought a number of shares in the open market as well. So that's certainly reinforcing with the shareholders that are watching those things. So Darin, give us the key positives, and I know you've mentioned a number of them. Give us the key positives about Pure Gold and Madsen, and then if you can find any, what negative factors still exist with the investment thesis?
Yeah, so the positives, as outlined, is this really is a big mineral system. We've got the benefit of historical production and a pretty exhaustive data set. We've got an indicated resource today that exceeds 2 million ounces. That indicated resource is defined by more than 1 million meters of drilling. The average spacing between drill holes within the indicated portion of our feasibility study or probable reserves now is closer than 6.5 meters between drill holes. So we've got very, very good definition on that resource and reserve. The capital cost at $95 million or $70 million US is it really is lowest in class. I challenge anyone to look and find a project that has a 1 million ounce reserve that has a capital cost that approaches what we're looking at here for moving the project forward. So the combination of a strong resource, first time disclosure reserves, low capital costs, the existing permits, the ability to move the project forward quickly, all give us a real leg up on building a mining company. I think the most important thing for investors to realize here, though, is that this really is the first step. This is the first phase of development. Again, our PEA that we put out this morning layers on the second phase, if you will, where we see potential for not only expanding mine life, but potentially with further work bringing that production forward so that we can impact the production profile. And then more broadly, we think that we've really just begun. The exploration upside that we see here is tremendous. The deposit is open across a 5-kilometer stretch on that that deep structure that I talked about earlier, and importantly is open to depth. We intersected it at a depth of about 1.3 kilometers a year and a half ago, returning 34.3 grams over 4.3 meters on the main part of the deposit. We have a hole that's intersected at 2.1 kilometer depth, returning 14.3 grams per ton gold over 2 meters. Importantly, the same geology, the same alteration. This thing is open to depth. And when you look at our neighbor to the north, Goldcorp, the Red Lake mine, they're currently mining at a depth of about 2.5 kilometers. And so these things are often deep rooted, and we see real potential to grow our asset with further work.
Yeah, and I would say the only thing that might be negative would be that, you guys have a fantastic all-in sustaining cost. So the only thing I can see that would be negative would be kind of a big picture, and that would just be, seeing gold have a significant decline, which it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. So I think you guys have a lot of great positives. They're lining up, and the stars seem to be aligning quite well with Pure Gold. So for potential investors who are listening, what would you say to them at this stage?
I would say that we again think that let's step back for a second. If you look at the people talk about the Lassonde curve and how put out a feasibility study and you go into a dull period and that's maybe the time to wait until you move into production and you get a re-rate. I would highlight that this is a very different scenario. We have just completed a feasibility study. We've layered on upside with a PEA. But this project is unique with existing permits in hand, with existing infrastructure, and a very short implementation schedule. That curve is very much compressed. On top of that, we have no intention on slowing down here. We do intend to continue our exploration activities, to continue to look to grow and convert resources. And so we see this as a really exciting year moving forward. Beyond that, this is the first phase that we've laid out here, but we see real growth on our project and ability to grow a mining company.
So Darin, have you given any thought as to where you might go and what you might do after Pure Gold?
Not at all. I'm very focused on building Pure Gold. I'm focused on moving Madsen Red Lake forward and looking forward to gold pour in 2020. Beyond that, our focus will be on internal growth. We've got several discoveries here that we think that we can incorporate into the mine plan with further work. And as I've described, strong growth potential on the project itself. Beyond that, we think that we would continue to look to grow. We're excited about Madsen Red Lake, and we think it'll be a platform for building out further growth.
Well, I'll be surprised if you're still working there at 2020, but that's just my own speculation on that. I think you guys have a good situation that someone else is looking at this point. So Darin, we appreciate you taking the time with us today.
Very much so. I appreciate it, and thanks for the opportunity.